Hey guys, Rob and Georgia here with you, aka VHS82 apostrophe, with episode 2, season 4 of the X-Files, the infamous one, the most notorious episode to ever premiere on TV, and then got banned because of its graphic nature and just its relentlessness, compliments, and its ferociousness too. Its compliments to its two writers, Glen and James Wong, who first collaborated about 2 years earlier. If you remember, they're the ones who gave us a liver-eating mutant, a demonic substitute teacher, appliances ordering people to kill other people, which, I don't know why, I just got the image of Stephen King looking down at the money teller. Hey, honey, this machine just called me. You all know the rest. Classic Stephen King. Of course, Maximum Overdrive, right? Home. Home is where the heart is. Home is where the family is. And in terms of the scope and context of some of the things I'm going to talk about, home is where the terror lives. And there is terror. And this might be one of the greatest applaudings or nods or whatever the case, however you want to phrase it. This is the singular greatest, I think, episodes in all of the X-Files, in terms of its monster of week approach, in terms of its non-mythos, in terms of, like me, like I get into it anytime, we start delving into a case where we get to think a lot about Mulder's in the behavioral science division, from which he came early on, writing up sketches on, I'm trying to think of the right terminology for that, on serial killers. And just, we get a few of those along the way. We already have gotten a couple of those. Let's think of Tombs, and I know this ain't the, it's the later on Return to it Orion, but it's the one that came first, Donnie, the one that, the necrophilia guy, which is a phenomenal episode. It's of course puts Scully in that might be the only thing missing from this particular episode is, you're made to feel both Mulder and Scully are put into a very, very iffy predicament. And I was telling a friend the other day, this is one of those really great moments in X-File lore, where you have your two great protagonists, and it's Mulder and Scully, going into a situation where you really feel for them every step of the way. And yet, neither of them are going anywhere. I mean, they're going to survive this harrowing tale that has roots deep into, I might as well just get right into this. Look, this fits perfectly right in between, say, Texas Chainsaw and Rob's House of a Thousand Corpses, and maybe even better, his follow-up to that, Devil's Rejects. In terms of the cinematography, the aesthetics of House, of course, really reign true. I really do believe Rob Zombie was influenced to a great deal. Maybe the three greatest influences, I think, on House has to be, we all know Spider Baby, or maybe you don't. Spider Baby, a Jack Hill film from earlier on, 64, I think, is when it was first ready, but it did hit the drive-in circuit until like 67, I think. Rooted in the nature of things like Spider Baby, influence, Spider Baby, Home, I'm arguing, that's my contention in this episode. This is a major influence that you never hear about. I haven't never heard about. Of course, Texas is always, ringing out there, but more so, this episode is a massive tribute to the films. Let me just go through, films like James Whale's The Old Dark House from 1932. In fact, his cinematographer, Arthur Edison, was also the camera guy on The Invisible Man. But cinematography is absolutely insane. The whole movie is insane, actually. The Femme family, who are the main passive antagonist, we'll call him, passive antagonist. Of course, I mentioned it, Jack Hill's from 64, Spider Baby, beautiful Arrow release, of course, Lon Chaney Jr., Alfred Taylor was the cinematographer on there. This one centers on, of course, the Mary family, who is a little bit not so passive or benevolent as the Femme family that preceded it. And of course, Hooper's 74 seminal classic, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which the house locale, certain dynamics, not really. I think it has more in line, this episode in particular, the house, just the idea of an inbred and demented family, the Sawyer family, the Sawyer clan, right? And don't forget about Judd, who, eaten alive, who doesn't live too far away. Of course, then you hit home, which fits in perfect with the Peacock family. If I didn't say it, the Mary family of Spider Baby. So you got the Femmes, the Femme, the Mary, the Sawyer clan. Of course, home introduces to us the Peacock. Of course, this is 1996. This episode drops in October, so it really is our Halloween episode without being Halloween. But this had to have been, the Peacock family had to have had a huge influence on the Firefly clan, from both House and ultimately Devils, and of course as it washes into Three from Hell from Rob Zombie, which of course and the cinematography. And there's one notable, the cinematographers on Home were Jean Joffin, I think that's how you say it, and Ron Stammett, Stannett, Stannett. I believe that's what it is. Those are two working cinematographers. Jean worked on 7 other X-Files, and Ron only 3 others. Jean, though, had the absolute, and now you watch the cinematography on this episode, and I watched it again this morning in a very dark room. And this episode is best watched in a pitch black room, and with others too. My boys and I watched it this morning. I think it was my 3rd viewing this week. Well, 2nd complete viewing. I tried to watch it late last night after Friday too, but I don't know, I just got late and my brain just shut down somewhere in there. But this is not one you fall asleep in, okay? So don't get me wrong on that. But I'm old and it was late at night. So this morning I watched it with fresh mind, fresh eyes, in a pitch black room. And the cinematography is unstinking parallel. When you gotta understand the scope and context that it falls into in terms of the films that I've mentioned. One of the very noticeable marks, I guess, of those films, forgive me if I don't hit the right terminology, I'm seeing it in my mind as Mulder and Scully. This is the moment when Mulder and Scully are first walking up the staircase. The camera is down low looking up. I know there's a technical term for that, but this is the way the camera captures the house and our first approach up the stairs. And of course, don't forget about that. There's like a cow's head or something on the stairs, which is interesting. Flies are buzzing. You just get the chill of the Sawyer clan coming up into the house for the first, the camera's down low. The house is set against a beautiful blue cloud filled sky, a beautiful pillowy white clouds. It's just a stark contrast. It's not how the show opens, but most throughout the episode it is in broad daylight until you go inside the house, and then now you are seeing perhaps one of Holmes' great influences in terms of the aesthetics in the house and how we move with the camera. It's got to be 95. And the aesthetics on some of those dark lit places and how they move with the flashlights, even the in-ground markings into the floor where the mother Peacock is rolled out on her sort of board with wheels. That idea had to have come from 7, the refrigerator being moved out, right? But the aesthetics from inside, The incredible layout of the Peacock family as Scully starts to look at this and see it, and the horror on, or the bewilderment, I guess, on Mulder's face the first time he sees Mother Peacock come out, and Scully makes a connection between the photographs and her, and she's like, no, Mulder's like, gotta get you home, we're gonna get you home, and she's like, Mulder, she's already home. The conversation between Mother Peacock and Scully is in terms of defense of her family and the situation they're in. We're going to get into this, but so many other things I just wanted to mention, because this film really needs, there for a second, this should have been on the big screen, because that's another marquee, I guess. I can get my words right. Noticeable thing of the cinematography is very often, as we moved into season 1 and 2, I often mentioned in season 1 how many times this was meant for the big screen. Chris Carter's main idea was to get through a couple seasons, but move it to the big screen and have a nice 6, 7, 8, however long it would have lasted, of a Monster of the Week marathon of just theatrical films. This episode goes so far into proving that point, that they belonged on the big screen. The way the camera captures it, Mulder and Scully, even at the beginning, after the opening sequence, but once we're on the baseball field with the boys, once we're transitioned to Mulder and Scully being there, examining the hole from which our victim is pulled from, that is the catalyst for bringing Mulder and Scully into this very harrowing tale of just inbred, demented family that has lived there pretty much in peace, you would imagine, since the days of the Civil War. The town and the family seem to tolerate one another in a way that you don't bother me, we won't bother you, and the peace is kept in such a way. I really thought about Texas, and when you're in that movie, guy in the wheelchair, I can't think of his name right now, but when he's talking about how summers used to be at their house in the old days when they would gather for family reunions, the creek bed was full of water, they'd go down there at the swimming hole and swim, and just on the other side is the Sawyer clan. And so I always try to figure out how exactly did they just get on without being run out of there. I think home goes a long distance in just sort of laying out the possibilities of how or what that Sawyer clan was really like, in a sense. They pretty much probably was a working deal. Leave us alone, we leave you alone, and the peace was kept. Now, that sort of disintegrates, right? And over time, they, of course, they, like the scavengers they are, they get what they can get, mostly travelers along, on their way through. But I think for the most part, they're forgotten by the locals. But home really does a good job of just painting that possibility of how that would have looked, I think. And so here the Peacock family has stayed for eons since the Civil War. But man, they have not forgotten the age-old sort of you trespass onto our property, you bring harm to our family, and we will reach out and hurt you in a very painful way. And that will be what will come of Sheriff Taylor and his wife in one of the most harrowing home invasion sequences, which I'm sure went a long ways to get this thing banned. But and it's, you hate it when that happens, because, well, first of all, 18 million plus people tuned in for the premiere of this. So the hype going in was pretty big. And I can't remember it well back then. I mean, I saw pretty much the whole X-File on their run. The only time I would have missed it, I was in the Army. If I would have been out in the field or whatever, possibilities I could have missed episodes along the way. But 18 plus mil, man, that speaks loud in terms of the people catching on to the hype, I'm sure it was through the TV spots and whatnot. So the Peacocks have lived unmolested. Their problem is, well, they continue to inbreed, and as their genetics just keep on, you think about the Mary and the Mary diseases, their genetics continue to get worse and worse and worse. which I love the picture layout on the walls. When we get to see the Peacocks in not such a terrible light. I mean, there's deformities, but those deformities are just beginning. We're here, and Scully is just absolutely astounded. She can't get her mind wrapped around how chromosomes look like this when they get the DNA reports back on the victim, which is a little baby. So let's just get out that. Let's just get the story out of the way real quick. If you've never ventured into home, it is a tale X-File well worth venturing into. We open up with a scene that it screams influence all over House of a Thousand Corpses. Now, Rob gets to work on his movie in 99, and this came out in 96, so he only had a couple years. It had to have been, the aesthetics are insanely overlapping with House. And so it's a dark, stormy night, and a birth of a baby has just happened within this house. You don't know what's wrong with the baby, but 3 elderly mutated, this is like right out of Hills Have Eyes, right? Mutated men who you kind of only get a light viewing of, because of the darkness and the rain and the lightning and everything else, which the lightning, just brilliant how they use the lighting to show us from time to time we're sort of eased into what they look like. Well, they're bearing ultimately an infant. Well, they picked the wrong place. You would imagine that their property is probably littered with buried infants, and maybe not only buried infants. There are light allusions to missing people, kidnapped people who might have fallen victim to the Peacock family. Now, emphasis isn't placed on that. It is really on just the inbredness and the attempt to populate the family via 3 and the mother, who the mom and dad were. They were all in a terrible, horrific car accident, and mom had lost her limb, and that, just as she tells Scully that story, is absolutely harrowing. And how she looked over and saw her arm just sitting on her dead husband. But the boys take her home. They take her home, and the rule of the home becomes, the only way we're going to repopulate this family is if mom remains the vessel. And the boys, the eldest, who really becomes the brother, still is the brother, but it's the father of the younger two. And even the aesthetics of the makeup and whatnot, you see this clearly in House, especially with Tiny. So the opening scene, they bury a baby that was born that was just way too mutated, and perhaps they just knew it was going to die, and so they bury it, but they bury it out too far from the property, where the next day, a beautiful contrast from the opening scene and into the X-File titles, of course. And then the opening sequence is, and the titles run for a while. It's actually a neat throwback to see the titles run. And before I forget, Diana Prince, some of my ideas come from her little piece of Fangoria. She made the comment that this episode is a 70s exploitation shock fest, and that it does feel like. And I'm definitely giving her full credit. It's a great, nice little write-up. If I remember, I'm going to drop the link down below to that piece in Fangoria. So boys are playing baseball a little too close to the Peacock property line, and this is where the baby's been buried. Well, in the process of baseball, the batter, his foot, he's just digging in, getting ready, and of course he feels something, looks down, and it's blood, and of course that stops everything, right? And so they find the infant. The sheriff doesn't know what to do, and how he doesn't just connect this with the Peacock family, or perhaps it's just he doesn't want to deal with it. He wants to protect his own, and it's not just out of really, it may be self-interest, but he knows what they're dealing with, and if you bring an outsider in, maybe you can kind of shelter yourself a little bit. And so he's sort of led to bring in Colin, Mulder, and Scully. And as they uncover this, they realize there may just be a kidnapped girl in the Peacock residence. And so this makes it a federal issue, which just heightens up the tension of everything, right? So they're there, and there's this moment where they're at Sheriff Taylor's, at the police headquarters, Much is made out of so many things. There is a great nod to the Mayberry of the Andy Griffith Show. In fact, Sheriff Andy Taylor is Andy Taylor from the Andy Griffith Show. In fact, there is a Deputy Barney, who, God, the last time I saw a deputy like this, it reminded me of the deputies in both Devils or Leatherface. This dude's hardcore, man. This dude, when it's time to go pay justice, the only thing missing is a real vigilante force, like you see in the opening sequences of Devils. He's ready to go, game on, man. Well, let me so they're there to do the autopsy on the victim, because Sheriff Taylor will come out to where the body was found of the baby. Mulder, gray scene, man. It's just everything the camera captures is so, how it captures Mulder and Scully, and how it captures the house in the distance, the Peacock, the brothers on the porch as they look across, wondering how is this going to impact them. Sheriff Andy Taylor is very clear, does not want to upset the natural order of things in this very small, very perfect small town, which will not be perfect after this. He invites them back to his headquarters in order to do a autopsy on the baby, which of course is in a hidden closet. Everything wants to be hidden. Everything in this town is hidden and kept under wraps because you don't want to upset the natural order of things. Right, he can't even allow them to use it because they don't have a morgue. They don't have all that you would expect that they would have. They just don't have it. The resources needed for Scully to do an appropriate autopsy. He won't even let them use his office because, as he says, the people, if the people will know his door has been locked and will wonder what's going on. And so this is a very, and so a lot of things are said in this episode that do make you, this town of, just outside of Pittsburgh, which I think is a nice little toss to Romero. Has to be a toss to Romero because Braddock, is it Brad? I think it was Braddock Town. I think it might be Braddock. I don't know why I didn't write it down. Surely I did somewhere, but this small town is outside of Pittsburgh. It's sort of like your Evans City kind of thing. If you know a lot about Romero, right? You know what I'm talking about. Mayberry is actually North Carolina. So, but this Mayberry, in essence, the deputy is Deputy Barney, and it's so great because when Sheriff Taylor first arrives on the crime scene to meet Mulder and Scully, he says, "Hey, it's Sheriff Andy Taylor," and immediately, they'd already been talking about Mayberry, and immediately Mulder is like, "Are you serious?" Well, later on when he meets the deputy introduces himself to Mulder as Deputy Barney, and very quickly Mulder's on this Fife, which again, that's Don Knotts' character, right, in the Andy Griffith Show. And so this is this real connection to the Andy Griffith Show. This is a town that is lived in a false sense of perfection for way too long, and it's about to have everything overturned on them. And so you got the odd time when they pull the baby out, the baby just fits in a little sort of square little container. Reminds you of Jaws, actually. I was struck by that when Hooper does the exam on Chrissy. A lot of nods in this show, a lot of nods. And so the decision is, of course, to go out and pay respect to the Peacock family. And that does not go over well because the Peacocks have already decided to target Andy Taylor and his wife. Now it's an interesting, I wasn't going to mention this, but Sheriff Taylor and his wife, they are an African-American family. And I only find it worth mentioning because the Peacocks, we learn, have been there since the Civil War. So that conjures up a lot of sort of imagery. I'm not sure if it was purposed like that, but it does sort of conjure that up, which is, you hope that with the resolution, the end of this episode, that perhaps a real kind of peace was settled into this town. Which, it's funny with the Civil War and everything, and it made reference to the War of Northern Aggression. this is outside of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. This is interesting because it just doesn't seem to make sense. This might have made more sense if this it was a town in the deep south or something. I'm not sure what to make of that. But anyways, so when they visit the Peacock family, the house, the brothers are gone, and mom is nowhere in sight. But she's able to relay important information to her brothers in terms of what's coming down the pike. And so they make that decision. They make their decision that night to go visit the Taylor household. And that is one of the most violent and upsetting home invasion sequences I have seen. And I think Rob was influenced on his 3 from Hell and the home invasion, which I know there are other influences working there, but I've never really heard home get mentioned. And just a very rich episode. I really do think this is the seminal episode of the entire X-File lore in terms of its Monster a Week approach. And it's one that really begged a sequel, a return to, which almost got it in Millennium. But apparently 20th Century studio execs, somebody was documented to have said, never again will the Peacock family ever find their way on TV, which is really a shame because you are tipping the hat to some legendary films, as I've already mentioned, be it Texas, be it Spider Baby, be it The Old Dark House by James Whale. And home fits in nicely in between Texas and of course Rob's effort with his own, where Houses really is just influences galore spill out. And so influences are coming from a zillion different places. It's amazing the jump from House to Devils in terms of just the clarity and the singularity of just the story. And it really is Rob's, probably the pinnacle of his film effort, and maybe second, Lords of Salem, maybe. So you got the home invasion sequence at the end, and I'm sorry if this is going longer, but I don't care. This episode deserves it. So you're either with me, and I hope you're with me. So that sequence, man, it's a great moment because the wife leaves the door unlocked because in Mayberry you don't lock doors. There's no need to. And Mulder says earlier, confides in Scully that if he ever retired, this is where he's retiring to, in the middle of nowhere. He doesn't want to be in the city anymore. And if you remember, his house in I Want to Believe is pretty much just like that. I never thought about that, but perhaps a lot of allusions to Mulder's approach to Scully as a mother figure. Of course, this will become more relevant as the episodes go on. But there's a really nice, intimate picture of Mulder and Scully and everything they will eventually become. We're seeing the seeds of that being planted. And just some great, the cinematography is gorgeous. It's gorgeous no matter when it is, where it is, how it captures things. Even when Mulder and Scully are enjoying a conversation and talking about chromosome defects and whatnot, it's just seeing these. It's gorgeous in a way that even rises above some of the best X-File episodes ever. Attention to detail is amazing, and I don't think I mentioned this, but Jean Joffin, one of the two of the cinematographers on this, will get to work with the seminal Tobe Hooper on the Masters of Horror, The Damn Thing, and another episode of that. So he'll get to work with not just him, he'll get to work, shoot for Incident on and Off Lost Mountain or Mountain Road or whatever with Don Coscarelli. He'll work with John Landis. He'll work with Stuart Gordon. So he will have a really neat, flavorable sort of genre work, and that really is the most of it. These guys do a lot of TV. So that is interesting. So after the hit on you get this incredible scene where, and again, seemingly another Jaws reference, where the deputy is on the stairs waiting of the house, outside the house, waiting for Mulder and Scully. And that's where he dumps a lot of information, the kidnappings, the possibilities, where this car, the Cadillac, of course, Wonderful, Wonderful, the song that much of this rides to, Mathis, who did not want to be the guy to allow for this, so they had to get somebody to cover the song for them. He sort of lays it out, and of course Mulder is just, what a great line. I love how it's delivered. He's just like, where are they? And he's just upstairs, inside upstairs. And when they find him, I think Mulder's first initial reaction is, man, they went cavemen on him. And they do. It is barbarism. And not just Sheriff Taylor, but his wife. It is just a very horrific crime that we're privy to. Some of it is off screen. The most important elements are off screen, I think. We get the point, we get the aftermath, and it is ugly. It is so ugly. Deputy Barney's fate is also ugly when the three decide to go pay visit to the I want to go back to the other families, the Peacock family. They know they're coming. They know they eventually will be there. Well, they get there, and Barney, Deputy Barney, Deputy Pastor goes up. Of course, Scully is watching from afar, but she is eyeing everything. And as he opens the door, she realizes there's a booby trap, and she can't warn him in time. And as he steps through, the line snaps, and this thing just flies and just takes his head right off. Insane, It was Saw before there was Saw, right? The amount of booby traps. One of them is foreshadowed absolutely beautifully, and it will be the demise to one of the Peacocks, which is just irony at best, right? Then they create the incredible diversion with the pigs. They're able to get into the house. Mulder goes to keep view. She's talking to the, because they'll set with the pigs out loose. The boys go out after the pigs to try to round it up. They make their way into the house. They try to explain things to Mother Peacock. Eventually, she'll have a much longer conversation with Scully. And by the time that conversation comes to an end, and some of the things I've already alluded to earlier, the boys have got the pigs all rounded up, and then they realize someone's in their house, and it's game on. They come up, and they realize we're in a, firefight. And it does kind of remind me, again, of some of this, how the sequence is laid out in Devil's Rejects. Very similar, how that will go down. I guess William Forsythe, Sheriff Waddell, is sort of your much more bigger than life deputy pastor. And so while they're in there, of course, as the brothers begin to bash their way into the house for the final confrontation, Scully goes back again and just pleads with Mrs. Peacock, and I think that's when Scully begins to realize that there is an element at work here that they are not going to be able to solve. They're not going to be able to resolve or bring any peaceful resolution. It just is what it is. They have intruded into something very barbarically old. It just calls to mind, there are obvious influences on this. The Ward family in rural New York, which My Brother's Keeper is based on. Charlie Chaplin talks about visiting somebody in Wales who had somebody basically hiding under the cupboards or something, man. It was just a deformed person. So you kind of got that going. But a lot of influences, and ultimately at the end of it, the mother and the eldest Edmund do get out of there. And that begged for another episode, but it was too much. It was too much for them to ever revisit, which is a real shame. Shout out to the guy who played Andy Taylor. I got his name written down, Tucker Smallwood. Huge shout out to him. He actually was in an episode of Millennium, by the way, season 2, episode 11, Goodbye Charlie's, from 1998. Talked about that. Just looking over my notes. I think I've hit pretty much everything that's important to really hit on. Sebastian Spence does play Barney Pastor, Deputy Barney Pastor. Great job there. Tucker Smallwood is great. His wife's great. Judith, Maxie. Of course, all the Peacock members, man. The three do really well under the makeup of Mom, man. Mom is pretty fantastic. Trying to see. I think that's really it. I think I've hit a lot of it. Yeah, for some reason I didn't write down the name of the town, but I do remember there being mentioned that it's outside Pittsburgh. So in my mind immediately I thought of George A. Romero, and anyway, so this episode is absolutely, it is stunning. It is stunning to me. It really is stunning. The cinematography, I could go on and on, how beautiful, how everything looks. The house is, it's like they studied these movies that I've referenced, I've talked about. It's like they really looked at them, and maybe they only looked at Texas, but the approach up the stairs, but it seems like they really should have, I'm sure they looked at Spider Baby as well, because similarly, how the camera approaches the house the first time is, there's that, where the house becomes bigger than life. It becomes its own character. The characters are always bigger than life, but this isn't just the antagonist. This is Mulder and Scully. Everyone, Sheriff Taylor, everyone seems to be bigger than life. This whole thing has a big screen vibe and feel to it that is so insanely good. It is. God, there's so much to enjoy. One of the things you pick up on too, and I'm just about done, is once you sort of get Barney's telling Scully about the list of possible kidnappings, and your mind just starts to race with, what have these Peacocks done, and what has the town allowed them to do just because they didn't want the confrontation with them. And how amazing. And the fact that these kids are playing ball so close to the Peacock residence, it does also invoke Spider Baby and how close people generally got to it, but without crossing that line because they knew better. I think it's a mother and a daughter, or where the mailman is trying to, the opening scene of Spider Baby. I gotta watch that today. It's so great. She just grabs her daughter and just kind of ushers away without really helping the mailman. Nobody wants to be on that property. Nobody wants to deal with that property because of the family on there. Sid Haig, by the way, great performance of him in Spider Baby. Lon Chaney Jr. and the others. Of course, Sid Haig, we know, will find his role as Captain Spaulding in Rob's movies. But there is a lot. There is a lot to say about this episode, and it is amazing. And it's just, I can't get the images out of my head. And I don't mean anything with the gore or anything like that. I just mean how beautifully captured the scenery and everything is. How much attention is paid by the two cinematographers. And I wish I knew where the responsibilities separately lay. Who is in control of what and the other, of what or whatever. Because they both worked hand in hand. So, I mean, it is edited almost perfectly. It's edited. And I know there's got to be other nods in here besides the ones I've mentioned. But I guess I'll just end there, man. Great, seminal, freaking awesome episode, which pays huge tribute to things that most people probably didn't even realize, and lays influences to things that will come after. Rob for sure, but I'm sure it's got to be other influences. Anyway, so Home, from October 11th, 1996, directed by Kim Manners. I probably missed that completely. Again, Glen Morgan, James Wong writing. And props to Diana Prince, who wrote that piece of Fangoria as well. Wonderful, wonderful. Johnny Mathis, unfortunately, didn't want to be part of this. And I didn't mention Phil Parment's work on Rob's shooting Rob's Devils. When the opening sequence with the house and everything, there's sort of you can see maybe there was influence to this with Parment as well. And it's interesting because you talk about the cinematography of Texas and Home. Not long after, in 2003, Daniel Pearl will return as cinematographer to do the remake to Texas. And so it's funny how you got Texas on one side and Texas on the other in terms of cinematography. That is amazing. That is amazing. So you can get this for, if you do not own a hard copy of the X-Files seasons, and you're like me, you don't like to buy things digital, I will have to say this: if you don't have the X-Files on hand, this is one. If I've said anything, like if you're still listening to me at nearly 40 minutes in, and you really want to watch this, but you don't have an easy, I would say it is definitely worth the $3 you'll pay for Prime to digitally buy it and just have it, and whenever you want to watch it. And that is definitely, I don't usually support buying streaming, but if you're just not ready to invest $200 plus whatever into this, that is a suitable way out of it. I think maybe not every episode of the X-Files, but this one in particular, it's worth the $3 if you're into a lot of things that I've talked about and mentioned. And by the way, if you're with me still, I am not doing anything else today as far as some of my other videos and stuff. This is enough. I wanted to pour everything into this and really just think about this. And so enjoy the rest of the day now. So, and you enjoy the rest of the day, and please comment on anything I might have said. I hope I did a good job. I hope I did it justice. This episode is probably better suited to a podcast when you're talking at greater length. A lot of the things that I've only mentioned but mentioned in passing. It really does deserve a full podcast in relating to the other films and its influence on what will come. And so in a short 40 minutes, I hope I did it some justice and giving you reason to go back and relook at it or see it for the first time, knowing fully exactly what you're in for. I dare say it is a perfect X-File episode. Perfect. It is perfect. Anyways, we always leave these things off with Go Bills.
This is not a dream. Not a dream.
We might be useful to you.